Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. If you want to still be masked up, I hope you're still masked up. I hope that if you want to get the vaccine, you get it. If you don't bother people who do, and vice versa. And I hope that no matter what you do, please keep away from other people. Back it up. Back it up. Okay. And I hope all of my college graduates, congratulations to y'all. Congratulations to the high school graduates. This is a very exciting time. So, this week I want to talk about a musician and a few material, videos. There's one video and one documentary that I want to talk about in particular about this musician. His name is Robert Leroy Johnson, and he was born May 8th, 1911, which from the video and I think the documentary, they kind of mentioned that they don't really know his actual birth date. Like this, he's an artist that's shrouded in mystery. Okay, and he passed away on August 16th, 1938. And if you can do math, you will see that he was only 27 years old, which is linked to the famous 27 Club, which is a club where very famous and very talented, a lot of times, musicians have passed away at the age of 27. And I'm sure there's a bunch of conspiracy theories about it, which I would like to explore. Maybe I'll explore that next week. Or something else might catch my attention, and I'll talk about that. But that's an idea. And then I also watched the documentary Devil at the Crossroads on Netflix about Robert Johnson. So I think you should check out the video by DeBurke321, which I will link in the description. And I will leave the name of the Netflix documentary in there as well. The Netflix documentary is only 48 minutes, and the video that I watched, I think, was only 14 minutes, which, if you just want a general kind of scan of Robert Johnson's life, I think the video was good, but the documentary was so very detailed. But what I'm going to do is just give some basic background information, and I made notes. So Robert Johnson was born in Hazelburst, Mississippi. And it's from Wikipedia, it says possibly May 8th, 1911. Although I think there was like some speculation of whether it was a day or two off. I think one of the videos of the documentary said that. And he was born out of wedlock. They did mention that. I think it was just in DeBurke's video. They mentioned that he was born out of wedlock. To Julia Mayer Dodds and Noah Johnson, which they say, I've heard that he never actually met his father, but he did look for him. This is very interesting. She was married to a Charles Dodds, and they had 10 children together, y'all. There's a lot of kids back in the day. Sometimes they still do, but not as much. And he had been forced out of town. Charles Dodd had been forced out of town by a lynch mob. And so then he had left because they had a dispute over land, so he had left. And the mom had left Robert with his stepdad for like 2 years. And then she came back and got him. She had a new husband, which I'm like, dang, I didn't know people got divorced like that. I don't know if it was a legal divorce. They don't really say. But Mama had a lot of loves, you know what I'm saying? Mama was a Rolling Stone, apparently. So, and he was a sharecropper, and he wanted Robert to be, like, work on the plantations and, just have, like, a typical job for a black person back then. And Robert had other ideas, and he had lived in Memphis for a while, for 8 to 9 years, and he had attended Kearny's Avenue Colored School, and he received learning in arithmetic, reading, language, music, geography, and physical exercise. But then when he was in Memphis, he also got the, gosh, I can't talk. And when he was in Memphis, he also started to love music. And was it the documentary? I think both the documentary and the video, they talk about how he was a really great harmonica player. That was the first instrument he ever mastered, was the harmonica. Okay. So I talked about the sharecropper and how he wanted him to be, the sharecropper. He wanted him to be just work on the plantation and be a farmer. Uh, so, okay, was this the one where he got buried? Hold on. Okay, so he got married at 16 years old to Virginia Travis in February 1929. And at that time, he was a musician, and he had been traveling and doing performing. And he actually played the guitar and the harmonica. Apparently, not very well though, which I'll get to. And unfortunately, once they were, his wife had got pregnant before he had went on the road at one point. I think I just said that in the documentary. He had went on the road right, I guess, when she was pregnant, and he planned on coming back when she gave birth, to see the baby. And unfortunately, they both died in childbirth. So by the time he got back, the wife and the child were already buried, and his family, her family, was very upset with him and was like, "Oh, you playing that devil's music, and this is why your wife and your child died." So it was a little crazy. Which, I'm not gonna say they're crazy. They were just probably superstitious. People are superstitious, especially in the South and Mississippi. I mean, hey. So they got upset about that. In 1931, he did have a child with Coletta Craft. No, with Virgie Mae Smith. He did. He wanted to marry her. I remember that in the documentary. They said that he wanted to marry her, but her family also was like, "Oh, you playing that blues, that devil's music." So blues was the music that he was playing, and it was considered devil's music, which I feel like every generation has their devil's music. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, they didn't like that, so they didn't want him to get married to her, and so they never got married. He did get married to Coletta Craft in 1931, but she died while he was on the road in 1933. So he's already had 2 wives pass away. He wanted to marry, Virgie, but he couldn't. So it was a lot going on. But they do have a son. His name was Claude Johnson, and in the documentary, the grandson was in the documentary. Now let me see if I can find his name. I should have looked this up before I. Okay, his name is Michael Johnson. There we go. So he was in the documentary. He was talking about his grandfather. So Robert wanted to be in Claude's life, but because of the music he made, he wasn't able to. So in the documentary, they had I'm gonna say vintage video. They had old video of Claude talking about his father. So Claude was saying that Robert tried to come and see him, but the maternal grandfather, would stop him and say, "Hey, you playing that devil's music? You can't be around here." So Robert would give money for his son, but he was never able to see his son. And Claude said that he saw his father twice in his life. So yeah. So with all of that turmoil and things going on, Robert was a traveling musician, like I said. And he would go to juke joints and on corners and would perform for change and money and the tips and stuff. So one instance that I thought was really interesting was a musician named Son House would talk about how they would play their music and they would stop and take a break, and Robert would try and play the guitar. So he would say, "Hey, can I play your guitar?" And apparently he was very bad. Son House, he was very country. He was just noising the people, which means he was just making noise and it didn't sound good. And people would ask Son House, "Can you tell Robert to stop?" So that's how bad he was, apparently. And so Robert had left. He would go through Mississippi, Arkansas, different places to perform. And Son House remembers us that he left they think that he went to go find his father for a year and a half. which he was with Ike Zimmerman, which is another musician, and Willie Brown, and he was working on his craft. He was practicing. And with Willie Brown, it was very weird, which he has a legend about. There's a legend about Robert Johnson. I'm going to get to that. And this probably does not help the legend, but apparently, I thought in the documentary it said Willie Brown, but when I looked it up, it says Ike Zimmerman, but I could have sworn it was Willie Brown. But they would go to cemeteries and practice because Willie Brown, either Willie Brown or Ike Zimmerman, said that, hey, if you play here and you're bad, nobody can say anything. Because, it's a cemetery. There ain't nobody there. I mean, there might be ghosts there, but, ain't nobody living. Can't nobody throw tomatoes at you, right? So, within this time, he's practicing and stuff, which I want to say that I think that's what made him good, is he practiced. But because Son House, the last time he saw him in that year and a half, he was so bad. So Robert came back, Son House was performing, and Robert had, come back to town. I think it was Mississippi, someplace in Mississippi, and he'd asked for the guitar again. And Son House was like, oh gosh, this kid again. Because, he was like in his early 20s. So Son House says when he started playing the guitar, he was so great that Son House and his band were in shock. He said their mouths were open on the floor. So this is where the legend comes in. Apparently, instead of it being like, oh, maybe he, practiced, because people couldn't believe that he had gotten so good in this short amount of time, which I feel like a year and a half is like a good amount of time to get good at anything. But they said in the documentary it was a short amount of time, that he had to have done something nefarious. So, and he does have a song called Crossroads, and what's the other one? Crossroads and Devil Blues. And so that did not help the legend about him. So, so the story goes that Robert, now this is from the Debunked 321 video, which really freaked me out because it made me spooked for a few days. I really enjoyed it, but it also made me spooked because I was like, why is this so easy? How do you make a deal with the devil and it's easy? Like, I feel like that's not how it should go. But anyway, so basically the legend how Debunked, because it's like a few different versions. So Debunked 321 DeBurk, same thing that made it wrong. DeBurk 321 describes it as, okay, so Robert, he's waiting in a literal crossroads, like, in the road at midnight with his guitar. And the devil just shows up, I guess. He didn't really describe it. I guess, I don't know if they met and they were just both there. But apparently the devil shows up somehow. He takes Robert's guitar, or Robert gives him the guitar, and he tunes it and he plays a song and he just gives it back to Robert. And that's the whole deal. There's no words, there's nothing said. So that kind of made me unsettled, because it's like, if you really want to make a deal with the devil, why should that be so easy? I feel like it shouldn't be that easy. But in the documentary, Devil's at a Crossroad, the same thing happened. He gave him the guitar, he tunes it, he plays a song, and the devil says, why don't you take this guitar, I have your soul. So Robert just takes the guitar. That's what the legend says. Of course I don't believe the legend, but it's always interesting because there's not a lot online about him. And even in, I want to say in the documentary, it does talk about both of his marriages. Now I'm rethinking about it. But in DeBurk's video, I don't remember talking about the second marriage. Or like, and DeBurk didn't talk about the son or anything. So that's why I say both combined are good to watch if you want to know about him. But he was a really good musician, okay? And they also said that he had long fingers. So when they were talking about him playing, he would play with both hands. He had long fingers, and he had, Son House described this in the documentary, that he had an extra string, so he had 6 strings on the guitar instead of 5. And people would say they described it as if two people were playing the guitar together, but it was just him by itself. So that's how good he was. And he did end up recording in He did end up recording in the year 1936. He had, recorded for AC Group, their record label, and he had done 29 songs. And a lot of the songs have, like, Devil's Devil's Blues, Crossroads. It was another one in the documentary that we were talking about. He used hoodoo references, and I thought that was really interesting because, I'm sure he knew the legend about himself. And he had been through so much, and he had 2 wives die. He can't see his son. One of his children and his first wife died. So he had a lot going on with him. So he probably leaned into the darker side in his music just because maybe that's really how he felt. People who knew him said that he was nice and friendly, but they said that he did have periods of time where he would leave for a few weeks and come back. And he was just kind of like a mysterious guy. But he was not bad for them, like in their opinion. But he couldn't see his son because he makes the devil's music. The first wife's family blames him because he has made the devil's music, apparently. So it was a lot going on in his life. And so towards the end of his life, he was throughout his life, he was a ladies' man. He'd been married twice. He had gotten one woman pregnant and wanted to marry her. Yeah. He's a musician. They're like ladies' men. So one day, he was at a bar, like a juke joint, and he had been flirting with another man's wife. So the husband, gave him some whiskey, but he'd been flirting with his wife. So who was the musician they said was with him? I think it was Willie Brown with him. Yeah, I think Willie Brown was with him at the end of his life. And Willie slapped the whiskey out of his hand and was like, "What are you doing? This woman's husband is giving you a drink. You don't know this man. Like, why are you taking this drink from him?" Right? In some stories, they say that they don't know who gave him the drink, but in the documentary, I think Willie Brown did say, yeah, it was the husband. And so Robert Johnson was like, "Hey, don't you smack no drink out of my hand." He didn't care. So I think either the husband gave him another drink, or he picked up the whiskey and drank what was left in the jug after he slapped it out of his hand. But either way, someone, it was the husband, he probably was the husband, poisoned Robert Johnson. And in the documentary, they talk about that they know who did it, but that person never faced any consequences. Which I'm like, why? Why would you not go to jail? You poisoning people? But anyway, he didn't. They were saying the last 3 or 4 of his life was very rough because they say he was heaving even in the bar, he was heaving and throwing up, and it was just a really bad death. And yes, he did pass away in his home at 27. So that was all about his life and his legend. And in the documentary, they said that someone was trying to make it was like in the 80s, there was like this big boom about blues and old school kind of like, it was like I forgot what they call it, like the beatniks and stuff, and it was like really popular. So somebody was listening to the music and they wanted to make a show. So they were looking for Robert Johnson and they found out he had passed away. So instead, because he can't be at the showcase, they have one of those old school record players, the giant records. And they have a little phonogram with a speaker, that goes out. And they played his record, because he's not here. And everybody went crazy at the event. They just loved it. So then he became very famous after his death, like 30 or, well, no, it was like, it was like basically like 20 or 30 years after his death. Everybody loved it. So then they, reissued it with all 29 of the songs that he ever made. And I listened to some of them, and it is very eerie, especially with the legend, even though I don't think the legend is true. But I mean, you make a song called Crossroads where you talk about being at the crossroads, asking the Lord what's going on with your life, and you're talking about devil's blues and walking side by side with the devil. I mean, it's a little creepy. So I haven't listened to all of his songs, but you know, he was very influential on artists like Bob Dylan, and I think Mick Jagger was in the documentary, and he was influenced. And it was just really interesting. It's not long; it's 48 minutes. You can just watch it real quick and then move on with your day. But it was really interesting, and it gave like a lot more detail than the Burke video, and I really like that. So I was inspired by the legend, so I, of course, wrote my own story based off it, like if it happened in the modern day. I didn't give it a time period, but we're just gonna pretend like it's the modern day. So here we go. It's called Crossroad Deal. Let's move you over. There we go. I looked down at my phone anxiously and was tapping my feet. I wanted to be a famous musician, but at what cost? Here I was at midnight at a literal crossroad, waiting on the dark man himself. I know black people usually don't go playing with the devil, but I had heard so many wonderful stories about great talent acquired by giving your soul to the hymn that I couldn't resist. I wanted success at any cost. My braids were blowing gently in the night air, then suddenly the wind stopped. So I felt like, you know, it's like real peaceful, and then all of a sudden the devil shows up, so now it's like, whoa, okay. And in front of me, a tall, literal, pitch black man in all black appeared. He pointed to my guitar, and I handed it to him. Even his eyes were pitched out black. It really freaked me out. I was shaking so badly I thought I would pass out. He had no expression on his face. It was just blank, and he tuned my guitar, then started playing a song. It was Devil's Blues by Robert Johnson, and the song was less than 3 minutes. I know, I played it before, but it felt like 10 minutes. After he was done, he handed it back to me. That's it? My voice cracked. He smiled the eerie smile I had ever seen. What were you expecting? His voice was gravelly. It sent a shiver. His voice was gravelly. So I wanted to use deep, but I was like, I want to use something different, so I said gravelly. It sent a shiver down my spine. I was just expecting some big scene and like some loud message about my soul being yours now. He had a surprisingly jovial laugh, then said, "This ain't a movie." He stuck the guitar out again for me to take. He took it to himself again, so she doesn't take the guitar. She took it to himself again, and with the same smile on his face said, "All right, I'll budge." He cleared his throat. "I am now claiming your soul. Once you have this guitar, I am now claiming your soul. Guess I should put and once. And once you have this guitar, enjoy the fame it brings you, but also know there will be much turmoil and a short lifespan." How old are you? I'm 23. I realized right after I said my age why he asked for it. Well, once you take this guitar, you will have an amazing 4-year career, and then we'll meet again. This time, he put it out a third time. This time I took it and felt like the air had been sucked out of me. I usually don't have to work this hard, kid. Most people take it the first time. I wouldn't care either way. See you in 4 years. With that, he disappears into the night. I'm left there to wonder, what the hell have I just done? So I thought that would be an interesting take on it, because I just felt like that is way too simple. Why should it be that simple? It shouldn't be that simple. So I feel like maybe there should be a little pushback. Is this it? Is this a deal? So yeah, so that's my little story and my talk about Robert Johnson. I hope you all will go, and if you want, I'm not gonna pressure you. If you want to look him up and watch the documentaries and the DeBerk video, I feel like they're really interesting. And DeBerk has a lot of videos about morbid musicians and musicians shrouded in mystery and sometimes violence, because some of the performances and the performers are kind of off the wall. So I think you should check him out. I think you should check out the documentary. There were some other movies that I would want to check out at some point, but so after I watched the DeBerk video, I just got really obsessed, so I thought I would make a whole video. Alright, I hope you all enjoyed that. I hope it was informative. I hope even if you don't go and look him up, at least you'll be like, yeah, that's intriguing, you know? Alright, so I'll see y'all next week. So I forgot to mention this in the main video, but these are the only 2 pictures that were ever taken of him. So there, you can see the myth, the legend, the man.